The first season of RWBY had a lot of rough edges, but managed to gather a large following, so it was only inevitable that the series would get a second season and a chance to improve some of the issues. I'm glad to say that RWBY Volume 2 managed to improve the series in almost every way. There are still a few problems, but nothing on the same level of the issues that plagued the first season. I'm Banana Owens, and this is an Otaku Youth Anime Review. Volume 2 possesses more of an overarching story. Unlike the first volume, each episode directly ties into the larger plot. This was necessary in order to expand the scope of the story. This was a very big improvement on the relatively weak plot of the first season. The pacing of this season is much improved as a result. The character introductions were mostly taken care of during the first season, which gives more time to develop the plot. While there still are a bevy of character introductions, they're handled in a much better way and are naturally woven into the plot. This second volume begins almost immediately after the events that characterize the first season's finale. Team RWBY decides to take a more proactive approach in pursuing Torchwick and uncovering the meaning behind the series of robberies perpetrated by him. The story places a large focus on how Team RWBY is dealing with all of this pressure. It's one of the main themes of the season, whether or not they're actually ready to do something. The later episodes make this very clear as one professor pretty much interrogates them on why they decided to become huntresses. This season really is about growing up and what that means for these characters. At the same time this is all happening, students from other academies begin to arrive at Beacon for the Vital Festival, where they'll be able to demonstrate their combat prowess against other students. The main antagonists for this season pose as foreign students in order to infiltrate the school. The villains are much more nefarious than the wisecracking Torchwick. They actually carry out some pretty evil stuff. My only problem is that their plan kind of fizzles out at the end. It's actually dealt with relatively quickly despite the season-long build-up to its conclusion. Because of that, everything just feels too resolved at the end of the season. Despite it being an improvement, the story didn't progress that much by the conclusion, and that's my one fault with the story for this season. A lot of characters that were underdeveloped in the first season received quite a bit of focus in this one. Even the existing characters are developed quite nicely. It has a similar reason to the improved story. Since the character introductions were done for the most part, they had more time to develop them. I'm going to talk about a few characters that stood out to me in this season. Yang actually received quite a bit of characterization this season. She was relatively ignored in the first one, so I was glad to see her receive some focus. Yang is bright, energetic, and peppy. She's also quick to turn into anger and a fiery rage. A lot of her characterization comes from her role as a big sister to RWBY. She's a thrill seeker, but feels a compulsion to be there for her friends and sister. This was due to her desire to find her birth mother, who left when she was just a baby, and this story element adds a layer of depth to Yang's rather cheery exterior. My favorite character of this season was Pyrrha. The first season saw her acting in a role as an emphatic friend with a slight attachment to John. They really built on this aspect in a very meaningful way. Pyrrha has feelings for John due to how normally he treats her. Despite her success, Pyrrha was relatively lonely until she met her team, and this is a really interesting aspect of her character and sets up a believable romance for the later seasons. One more aspect I enjoyed about the characterization is that the events of the first season play a huge role. Blake is the character that is altered the most by the aftermath. Instead of becoming confident like her teammates, she becomes increasingly stressed and neurotic due to the knowledge that the villains were still out there, and this aspect of her character plays out for the first half of the season. Overall, the second season fleshed out some characters neglected in the first season, while simultaneously giving most of the cast some sort of development. There are still a couple of neglected characters, but it is an improvement over the first season. The animation is again one of the highlights of this series. Much like with the first volume, the animation excels the most in the action scenes. Thankfully, it appears that there are a large variety of fight scenes, or at least they are better placed in the story. Monty Oom's animation prowess for combat once again shines. I also rather enjoyed the combination aspect of the action scenes. These scenes are much more collaborative in this season. There are larger set pieces and a focus on the team aspect of the action. Episode 4 has a fight sequence that features all 4 of the members of Team RWBY facing off against the same enemy. The scene is an absolute highlight of the action animation, showing off a wide range of collaborations between the characters in a variety of interesting ways. I said it last week, but this show is worth watching for the action scenes alone. The animation also addressed the problems that plagued the first season. The animation of the everyday scenes is greatly improved. The animation is less stiff and much more fluid now. It really adds a layer of depth to see the little moments of idle animation. Of course, there are still moments of less than stellar quality, but there are much fewer in number than this season. As for my main critique of last season, the black silhouettes are no longer present. Instead, they are replaced by characters that are obviously altered models of the main characters, but this is not that noticeable. It really adds to the sense that these areas are populated. Even if the character models can look similar on a closer view, it was the right decision, especially compared to the black silhouettes. This season expanded upon the great animation and fixed a variety of issues, and it was a great step forward. I don't know if I have as much to say about the sound design as I did during the first season. The voice acting improved immensely. It was obvious with the experience of the first volume, the actors have all grown into their roles exceptionally well. The newer characters introduced are even acted to perfection. I was quite harsh to Yang's voice actress in the Volume 1 review, mostly due to her performance being crippled by a lack of lines. I am proud to say that she improved quite a bit with Yang's greater focus this season. As for the specific Foley work itself, the sound effects employed are of a much higher quality. The lower quality sound effects of the first season appear to have been replaced, which adds on to the overall quality of the series. Of course, the popping soundtrack by Jeff Williams does not disappoint. Casey Williams returns to give voice to a large amount of songs. Much like with the first season, these songs provide the perfect ambiance for the action scenes, so much so that I recommend purchasing the soundtrack outright. Much like with the animation, the sound design of the second season improves on the weaker points of the first season while maintaining the quality of the better aspects. RWBY's second season managed to address the problems of the first season quite well. It is a much more polished product than the first season. The story concludes in a slightly disappointing manner, but it was an overall improvement. The overarching plot was a main focus and really ramped up the stakes. The characters were similarly explored well, and some of those that were left out in the first season finally saw some development. The animation and sound design maintained what was great and fixed some of the more nagging problems of the first season. The second season of RWBY was a resounding success. It showed the commitment to a sense of improvement. I give RWBY Volume 2 my watch rating, with a recommendation of a purchase of the home release. For those who simply just want to check out the show, you can watch it in its entirety on YouTube or Rooster Teeth's website. Join me next week as I review RWBY Volume 3, and thank you for checking this piece out.